I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here. Glad to have you along. Boy, isn't it a beautiful day? We deserve it, I think, and so hopefully you'll get a chance to get out and enjoy some of it today. I'm pleased to begin today's program with two friends of mine, two people that are active in community and committed to the well-being of the entire community, but particularly the development, the education, the opportunity for Black and Brown families as well. Rashad Turner is president and CEO or executive director, I think, of Minnesota Parent Union. And we'll have Bill English, who's just one of the guiding lights in our community, one of the elders who connected me and Rashad. And we want to have a conversation about the strike that is going on right now in Minneapolis, the strike that didn't happen in St. Paul. And my question is, how could St. Paul come to an agreement, and why can't Minneapolis come to an agreement? My ongoing concern, however, and I'll pose this to both Bill English and Rashad Turner, is a concern that some parents feel that Minneapolis in particular, but both systems, are not delivering on promise for Black families and Brown families. And we know that the entire education apparatus was beset in the past year, 2 years, because of COVID-19. All of our lives were in every element or aspect of our life and community. But that was particularly impactful on families with students, on students' educational experience, on teachers' ability to deliver their promise, their instruction to students, how systems organize the delivery of the responsibility to educate children and to support families. All of that on the table, all of it, I think, gave the general public a reason to not be as critical because, over the past years, we've looked at the gaping disparity in outcomes and performance by Black children in particular, and people of color in general. We've looked at the commensurate lopsidedness of suspension rates in schools. We've looked at how some people characterize public education as a pipeline for Black kids in particular, Black boys in particular, from the community into the correction system. So there's a reputation that public education has that is not particularly good. And while Minnesota may be one of the best states in the country in terms of educating its general population, the opposite is true for Black families and Black children. Well, I'm glad to have Bill English here and Rashad Turner. And before I bring Rashad Turner and Bill, let's you and me have this discussion. We both are old timers here, been around for a long time talking about our community, about schools, about different resets where the district would say, let's start fresh and give us 10 years to do this or give us 18 years to do this. But we always end up where we started, and that is at a huge deficit for Black and Brown families and children. Bill, how you doing today, brother?
Well, I'm doing fine, and I'm happy to join this important broadcast. And thank you for giving Rashad and myself as a member of his board chair, vice chair, to speak on this issue of while teachers are on strike and the kind of impact. So I'm happy to fill in historically, but I think it might be important, Al, for you to understand that from a historical perspective, I see the Minnesota Parents Union as the only opportunity we've had in years to turn it around. The unions control our politicians. If we're being brutally frank, they will not take a position on the Page Amendment to guarantee a quality education for all kids. Our legislators, Black, Brown, don't take a position on it. That's a fact. Number two, ending LIFO. 60 Black teachers lost their job in Minneapolis 2 weeks ago
16
because of layoffs.
16.
iPhone. Last
160.
yeah, 60. And there's going to be more coming if they don't with because of budget issues. The place is almost bankrupt, so that's why the superintendent should be fired. But there are a lot of issues there. But the Minnesota Parents Union, which has now been around for a couple of years, is slowly organizing and do a wonderful thing with parents and empowering parents, teaching parents, and empowering them to take control of their children's education. So done a lot of great work. I've seen organizations now, we've seen them all in and out. They don't pay attention. Soon enough, they give up. This one, for the last 2 years, has just continued to grow and make more impact. And they're not only, while they focus and target on kids of color, there are white people out there who belong to this union, parents who see that they don't have control of their kids. And while their kids may be making progress, at grade level, they're not making a year's progress. And if you're not making a year's progress, you're not able to compete in a global society today. So this is what the teachers union, the Minnesota Parents Union, have taught me, and why I was so enthusiastic to support this effort. So you need to be talking to the lead man, Rashad Turner, who's quite capable of giving you both the background where we are today and why it's so important. I'm here to show my support and to let our community know. They know I'm a strong education advocate. Have been. I would be the only person in school board meetings. That I've on for months, And the school board union told school board members they run an election, if they saw them talking to me, they wouldn't support them. That's factual. So beside that, I'm going to let Rashad speak because he needs to put this into perspective of what this strike means to our parents today.
Rashad, good afternoon, brother. Good to see you again. Thank you for being here. So I want to do 3 things over the course of our time together. One is acquaint people that don't know you with your story, your passion, your vision, why you do what you do. Number 2 is talk about the parent union, Minnesota Parent Union. What is it as an organization? What's the premise? What's the value proposition? And then finally, we want to bring it all into an examination of the crisis the community is facing right now, and that is the strike that is happening as we speak in Minneapolis, the strike that didn't happen in St. Paul. And I'm wondering, how do we compare and contrast? Is it a good idea to wonder how solutions were arrived at that were acceptable to the unions and workers and teachers in St. Paul, but we've not gotten there in Minneapolis? What's the difference and what's the common thread? Rashad, good afternoon, brother.
Hey, good afternoon, Al, Mr. McFarlane. I appreciate you having us on. Always good to see you, and good to see you, Mr. English. I appreciate you being on here. I'll start with a little bit about my background.
Sure.
I grew up, had a rough childhood. My father got killed when I was about 2 years old. Mom had a tough time dealing with that. Eventually, my grandmother raised my brother and I. And, I used to share that story, and I always would remind folks, hey, I'm not trying to tug at your heartstrings there, right? But it took me a little bit of time to sort of figure out what's the point of sharing that story. And the point is not just that I had a rough childhood that is very similar to a lot of what our children face today, but I always am reminded by the rock that my grandmother was, right? The rock that my grandmother is. And when it came to education, I used to see my grandmother go into that school and say, hey, you're not going to let Rashad just sort of slide through here, right? Hold him to high expectations. She was really my rock, but also my classmates' rock, right? And it's something I learned from her that, and I think the research even says this, right? If you have one strong advocate, life outcomes can be greatly different than when our children have nobody advocating for them. So for me, my grandmother, I can't thank her enough for being there for my brother and I and for my siblings, but I also can't thank her enough for showing me how to advocate, right? Having my back. And that's exactly the reason we launched Minnesota Parent Union, is to have parents' backs, right? We know that this education system is a beast. There's many things wrong with our education system. You can quadruple that or times 10, when it comes to Black and brown children. So at Minnesota Parent Union, we like to talk about three things. And that's one-on-one enrollment support, which is where our team helps family find better schools or new schools on their journey. Second thing we like to talk about is our side-by-side advocacy, which we're seeing during this strike, right? Being alongside parents, fighting the fight for our children. And our third pillar, if you will, is Parents in Power, right? I know a lot of us have seen over the past couple of years how, you could say some of our more conservative parents or far right parents have really been tackling some of the things that they see wrong with our school system. Now, whether we agree with them or not, they are a groups of parents across this state and across this country who are standing up, fighting for what they believe in. And at Minnesota Parent Union, we try and be that family-powered education alliance to really give parents the information, right? There's a ton of information as far as rights and responsibilities when it comes to education that a lot of our families don't have. We don't have the access to that information. Schools aren't transparent when it comes to how schools are doing or how families can be a partner in that process. So information is key. We do everything we can to close the information gap, but then also, right, we help families understand we don't have to just sit back and take this, right? It's our children who bring the dollars to these schools. And as parents, we have to be the ones to step up, protect our children, and make sure our children are getting what we need. So putting parents in power, making sure schools see parents as partners are ways that we see the quickest way to close our worst in nation education gaps that we have here in Minnesota. Al, you on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, so take a minute to back up and describe the issues on the table for both St. Paul and Minneapolis for our listeners. What we do know is that, St. Paul was able to avert a strike minutes before the strike deadline. Minneapolis has not been able to. And right now, students have been out of school for about 5 days of classes, and there appears to be no resolution at the moment. And from what I'm reading, the teachers and the district are negotiating salaries, class size, mental health support for students, and now they have to be concerned about makeup days as well. So I understand that both sides are very far apart on wages and on mental health support, and the union is saying that it's not going to negotiate on these points. And that position is taken. I've talked to other guests who are in sync with and supportive of fair wages for teachers and support staff, and the right complement of resources to support the mission of education. But they also are saying, is this the right time, given the impact of COVID-19 and what it has done to rob both students and families and educators of the opportunity to continue this work? And is this opportunistic, on the other hand, given that the state is waiving a $9 billion surplus? Is this an opportunistic grab by organized labor, by unions, and at a time that puts students at risk, that does not respect the best interests of students? So take a minute, Rashad, talk about St. Paul and talk about Minneapolis as you see it. And in the process, talk about the standing of the union. Union's interesting name because we're talking about the teachers and the organized labor, but you're not a labor union. You tell me what you are by distinction, so people get a sense of the standing of your work and your affiliation.
All right, thank you. So just quickly on, what we are, right? We are a union of parents, right? We prioritize the needs of parents, the needs of our children above all else, right? So when we think about teachers unions having that fiduciary responsibility to teachers, a question we always ask is like, well, who's looking out for the parents,
Mhm.
right? Who's responsible for making sure parents have what we need? And we said, hey, it's us parents. So, we're not organized labor. We believe in organized labor. We believe that people should have protections within their employment. Where we take issue with teachers' unions are the policies that they present, that they implement to protect teachers, which end up creating barriers for our children, right? Now, before I get to the differences in the unions on, either side of the river, let me point out some similarities for our viewers, right? And I know that the union has done a great job of spreading the message of, hey, this is all, our kids are doing bad because of COVID, right? COVID had us out of school. We've all heard that narrative, but I want to bring us back to 2018, 2019 data, right? Which shows in Minneapolis public schools, BIPOC children, 24% proficient in math, 29% proficient in reading. Our children who qualify for free and reduced lunch, 21% proficient in math, 26% proficiency in reading. If we look over in St. Paul, 2018, 2019, BIPOC children, 24% proficient in math, 31% in reading. For our students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, 21% proficient in math, 28% proficient in reading. Right, so that is and has been for a long while the experience of Black, Brown, Indigenous children in our public schools, our district schools on both sides of the river.
Bill, let me jump in first. Bill, that's kind of why I ask you to sort of set the condition here, because we've had this conversation back when Carol Johnson was superintendent of schools. We've had it when Richard Green led the school district, when John B. Davis was in charge of the public schools. And so there is a history of subpar performance. And the question has always been, is it that the capability of Black and Brown children is different from the capability of white students, or is the curriculum such that it disadvantages Black and Brown and supports the idea and the ideation, identity of white students? Or is there some other factor? Is there a question of efficacy in terms of including enough people from Black and Brown communities as teachers to act not only as teachers, but as role models and as friends who are teaching and rearing a community because of their presence in the community? So, Bill, talk about that whole history and how the numbers, the disparities are not new.
Well, let me just one part of that before you, because I think you're fundamentally right. However, I want to remind everybody that when Richard Green was superintendent, our graduation rates were almost as high as that of white kids.
Okay.
Remember that. Now, in between Richard was the John B. Davis, who replaced Richard, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a reason that contract was not renewed. And we ought to remember those factors. Factor was, Richard told the union, take a flying you know what. He was going to do what he's going to do because he was going to see that Black kids got the same education. And some well-known political figures lobbied against him to get the school board not to renew his contract. And he was a wanted figure, and he could have went to Houston. He ended up going to New York.
Yep.
Now, fast forward to John B. Davis. That's when it started to go awry. John B. Davis, then they brought in outsider, I can't think of his name. He was a consultant, and he tried to run the school, Peter someone.
Peter,
then
Peter Hegard, maybe?
I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was Peter someone. Anyway, he ran it, and then they got Carol.
Mm-hmm.
And Carol, I remember once asking Carol, about curriculum. I said, you belong to superintendents where all big city schools have access to a distorted history of the presence of African Americans. This is long before the 1619 Project was even discussed.
Mm-hmm.
But just the impact of that. So, you know, the history books are full of BS, yet you all buy them and spend our money for them. So why don't you just say, no, we're not buying your textbook. As a matter of fact, we're sending them back to you, and we're going to create a group of scholars from across this nation, whether it be Harvard, Princeton, Black scholars, to write the true history of America. And those are going to be textbook. And she said, Bill, that's a radical notion. And you're right. But the fact is, you don't understand the power of the textbook union and the teachers union. And you know how New York unions spoke to the education of Black and brown kids. That's why the Harlem Achievement Zone came about. They weren't doing very well either there because of the power of unions. So Rashad's brilliant idea was, well, if teachers can organize and service workers can organize, why can't parents organize? Because they've got as big a stake as any in their kids' education. And they pay the taxes that pay the teachers. Right. So to me, it was brilliantly conceived. And so as I move forward now, we're marching side by side when they don't need me to lead them. They need me to march side by side with them, or for that matter, get behind them. Because I'm an old soldier in this struggle about education. And I listened to new ideas and I learned. And so when he came to me with this idea, I said, this is an idea whose time has come. And when I begin to understand again that evidence-based programs prove that it is not the ability of a Black kid to learn. There are no inherent disabilities. You don't even have to sit next to a white kid to get a good education. So we know that. The evidence shows that. You got schools in Minneapolis beating the odds right now. Take a look at Greater Friendship Academy. Same kids that can't get a reading score at Bethune are getting it at Greater Friendship Academy. Right. So come on, man. I mean, this is about people who care only one thing. Remember the other thing, talk about wages. Now, the Minnesota Parents Union support raises for those low-paid teaching assistants. Mm-hmm. But Minneapolis has got some of the highest paid teachers in the state and the country. St. Paul just moved ahead of with this new raise. So the raise that they're asking for, puts them, again, at the highest level in the country to work 9 months a year, paid 12. Something in excess of $96,000 average salary a year 2 years ago, before some of these raises took place. I don't know what it is today. But I do know that figure was that. Yeah. So my sense to it is, from a historical standpoint, we are now in a place where we're saying, if you're going to sign a contract with the union, then let's do three things. Let's Rashad, tell them what A it is.
Protect teachers of color.
That one, end LIFO. Last in, first out. That's why we lost 60 teachers of color. Let me tell you something.
Bill, did you say 60 or 16?
60.
Okay, yeah.
60 teachers 2 weeks ago of color lost their jobs. Now you tell me why St. Louis Park and Robbinsdale can fire and hire on the basis of merit. They passed it. Minneapolis could pass that in a minute, except the union-controlled school board and whoever runs it, which is the school board, and the superintendent who acts on their policies, don't think they don't even bring up LIFO. For all practical purposes, F them, those 60 Black teachers. So I got a real problem with Black teachers who are now marching with these unions when they just allowed 60 of their fellow teachers to get laid off because of an outdated, unneeded policy of LIFO. So yeah, that's number one. What's number two, Raj? Rashawn.
The other thing that I would just add there, since we're diving into the strike a little bit, at the beginning of the strike, right, before the members took the vote, 98% authorized the strike. What the teachers were told is that this strike was about protecting teachers of color. The teachers union put the MOA on the table. The district said, hey, let's dance. Let's do this MOA. And now it's been crickets out of the MFT leadership around protecting teachers of color. What they've put in front of us are our ESPs, right? And this is the third thing that Mr. English was just going to point out there. We want the district, right? We're encouraging the district to pay ESPs a living wage, right? The thing we are pushing back against is that with the teachers unions, and this is true for Education Minnesota, right down to MFT, right over across the river to St. Paul Federation of Educators, these are 96 to 98% white women who are speaking on behalf of Black people. 96 to 98% white women who lead in these unions, who are putting Black and brown adults out in front to provide cover for the fact that, just like every other strike we've seen in this state and around the country, this boils down to a bunch of white women receiving higher pay, right? The salary increases that we're talking about, those aren't going to hit the least experienced teachers. And we all can guess who the more, less experienced teachers are, because it's hard for them to get in the door. It's hard for us to keep them in the classrooms because of LIFO. And those are Black and brown teachers, indigenous teachers, teachers of color, who Greta Callahan, the leader of MFT, told her members, we're going on strike to protect teachers of color. And right now, as Mr. English pointed out, that the union has been silent. They haven't signed that MOA. They allowed for 60 teachers of color to be laid off due to LIFO, last in, first out.
That's amazing. And so I'll come back to that. So there were three ideas you wanted to bring up. That was one, right? Or did that cover all three of them? LIFO was number two?
Yep. So LIFO, in LIFO, that's the big thing here, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say to our community that there's a lot of information out there. So I don't want to get people into the weeds, but Mr. English described LIFO. It's last in, first out. Mm-hmm. For folks who are paying attention, and maybe you can get online and Google, there have been several teachers of color, get this out, who have won Teacher of the Year in this state of Minnesota, only to be laid off a couple of weeks later because of LIFO. LIFO is designed to protect seniority. We know who the most senior teachers are. It's not teachers of color. So what we're seeing right now in Minneapolis is a battle to protect Black lives, right? I would say the civil rights issue of our time, and you gentlemen are my elders, so it might be different for y'all, but for folks my age, parents my age, this is it. Quality education is the civil rights battle of our time. And what we're seeing right now is the power, the influence that teachers unions have on the politics in this state and even nationally. I mean, these folks have pulled out all of the stops. You've got Bernie Sanders speaking out on this, Ilhan Omar, people who are speaking out to protect seniority, but they're turning a blind eye to the fact that Minnesota has worst in nation education gaps. Minnesota probably has worst in nation disciplinary disparities, as you mentioned at the top of the show. So our kids have been in this education crisis, mm-hmm. right? And I think it's past time that we put children first, right? When I hear from the teachers unions, all of this mental health stuff, right? What I hear is really like, oh, these kids are broken. And folks might have heard me say this before, but we've got one of the worst belief gaps here in Minnesota in our education system. You pointed out some things, curriculum, you pointed out a few things, right? But one of the biggest things is that belief gap, where they think that our children are not capable. They think that, our parents aren't capable. And what we're seeing right now is parents being pushed to the back of the line, our children being forgotten about. And here's another thing I'll point out. And I know you want to say something, Mr. English. Right now, if you think about over the past 7 years and how the social justice movement has progressed in this state. I mean, Minnesota's been national news, international news for our social injustices.
Mhm.
Right now, this is that time, right? This is a social injustice. Our children are facing the injustice. Our ESPs are facing the injustice. And you have several, right? People, they know I'm going to run my mouth. They know I'm going to point out these issues. I'm going to push back on the status quo, even if it feels lonely sometimes. But the fact of the matter is, we have Black teachers like Alexis Mann, like Nafisa Muhammad, like the Black ESPs who were just interviewed by Reg Chapman the other day on WCCO, who are telling us loud and clear that they do not feel like, as teachers of color, they are the priority of the union. So a lot of my frustration has been, we are ignoring these Black women who are speaking up. We are giving white supremacy a pass right now, and it's because we're not getting out and getting the information. We're listening to folks who don't have the best interest of Black people, let alone Black children, in mind. And people ask me, well, how can you say that, Rashad? Again, you can look at the data, right? This isn't a new issue of Black kids not being able to read. I talked about 2018-19. Well, if we look at 2021 data, it gets even worse. So, there's a lot of frustration, a lot of energy that gets pointed towards the teachers unions, towards the district, right? At Minnesota Parent Union, the one thing we've been doing this entire time is helping families find new schools, right? Our children deserve a quality education. They deserve to be in
What does that mean?
schools.
New schools in the public school system or
Yeah.
outside of the public school system?
They can be charter schools, which are public schools. They can be private schools. We've helped families get into districts like St. Louis Park or surrounding suburbs. So we're agnostic, we like to say, right? We don't tell families where they have to go, but we ask families questions. We help them find where they're looking for, right? And that's something that, what can we do as parents during this time? Well, we can find our children the best quality education, the best school possible. Because again, our children, they don't get a K-12 do-over.
I'm Al McFarlane. You're listening to Conversations with Al McFarlane. My guest, Rashad Turner, he's with the Minnesota Parent Union. Also, Bill English. Bill dropped out for a second here, but I'm sure he'll be back. Bill English is a director, board member of the Minnesota Parent Union. And we're talking about the teacher strike and the question of supporting Black children, Black families, Black teachers, as a matter of fact, and whether or not all of us are living up to our stated commitment to ensuring equity and the opportunity. What does it mean? Equity in terms of guaranteeing, assuring that resources and personnel and systems are in place to deliver the highest quality education experience for every child, including every Black child. That is not the case at present, as Rashad has indicated, whereas the proficiency rate in reading for BIPOC, Black, Indian, Indigenous, and people of color had been in the 24 to 24% in the school year of 18 and 19. It's not very different now. 24, 21%. You can give me the numbers again if you would, but
Oh, yeah.
my impression is like 20% or thereabout proficiency of Black families, Black children in math and reading. Whatever the number is, it's insufficient. And it's been going on for a long time. Bill has said, though, there have been times when the gap did not exist. And when it did not exist under Richard Green, it didn't exist in part because of position Superintendent Green took, placing the interest of Black children above everything else. So listen, love to get, see, Lynn Crockett says MFT is using Black uninformed Black students to support them. Lynn, if you got a minute, come on the show. We can send you a link. We'd love to have your voice, because we see on TV now that students are out marching with the teachers. So curious as to what that means and how you interpret that. And you're saying that they're using uninformed teachers to support their cause. Rashad, go ahead. Keep talking. So,
Al, I would just say, Miss Crockett, she's an OG on the north side. And here's something, right? Last week, I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was the only one of a few seeing how MFT is using our people, right? It actually made me sad. I started to tear up a little bit, because it's absolutely inappropriate, right? To use our children who you're not educating. You're not teaching them how to do math. You're not teaching them how to read. What you're teaching them is sort of how to be puppets. You're using them. And it's just not okay, right? I mean, we've seen the same thing on both sides of the river, right? A couple of weeks ago, my niece in her backpack had a page-long message from St. Paul Federation of Educators outlining how parents could support. All right, we've never received that same letter in her backpack about how schools plan to support our children's education and teach them how to read, right? So I think it is absolutely inappropriate to be using our children, using adults who are uninformed, right? I watched a panel last week that my sister Nikema Levy Armstrong put on with the Racial Justice Network. And the one thing I noticed about our babies that were on, our students that were on there on the panel, is that if you ask those kids something about a teacher, well, they're thinking about their favorite teacher, right? They're not thinking about the worst teachers that they have. Yeah. They're not thinking about that school to prison pipeline. They're not thinking about, the teachers that are calling Black professionals, other Black teachers, Black B words, or the teachers like the one at Northeast Middle School who called a Black kid the N word, right? They're not thinking of those teachers. They're thinking about the Nafisa Muhammads, the Alexis Manns, the teachers that they know care for them. What were you going to say, Mr. English?
It's very clear to me. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry I dropped off for a few minutes there, but I want to go back to number one. Our support for the Page Amendment. It's well reasoned, and we need to change. It's well reasoned.
Bill, hold on. So let's unpack that, because you've made reference to that. Let's tell people what the Page Amendment is, for whom it's named, and what the purpose and intent of it is, and why it's in this discussion.
It's in this discussion because the Page Amendment is by Justice Alan Page, former Viking, most valuable player in the league as a defensive tackle. Never had been done before. But the point I'm making is he became an esteemed justice, and he has a foundation for education. So he's well versed in the education of Black kids. And he and the head of the Federal Reserve Bank formed a coalition to get the legislature to amend the Minnesota State Constitution to guarantee a quality education for everyone. Now, why would the teachers union oppose that? You need to ask yourself that question. Why are they opposing the Page Amendment? You would think that they would be if they were for all about kids. So, that's number one. That's another thing. And in terms of our people being used, what's new? About whenever white progressive women, which I'm sorry to call out this way, but they get in the way of using us because they want us to think they're our allies. But when you ask for the outcomes, they disappear and they blame it on poverty. They blame it on parents. They blame it on everybody, but it's the only job in America, some person said, where you can do nothing the whole year, make no progress, and still draw your paycheck. It takes 18 months to fire a bad teacher. 18 months. Okay, to fire a bad teacher. What are we talking about? And you don't want a constitutional amendment to guarantee? Then what's wrong with the union? Moreover, ask yourself, what's wrong with our legislators? Where are their gonads? Or whatever you want to call it. I don't mean it's a sexist thing. But why are they afraid of the teachers union? Ain't a single one of them gonna not get elected because Education Minnesota don't support it. Because it's mostly black people and the true moderates who put them in office the first race. So I don't know why they're afraid to speak out against it. And if that comments bother them, I'm sorry, because I felt I would help every one of them to get elected. I've seen what the Democratic Party did to Jeff Hayden. So come on. I don't want the DFL parties who stand behind these damn strikes to say a word to me because they've used us like everybody else. So it's time to call them all out, and we all for the Minnesota Parents Union. I wish Lynn is a long time. You call her OG. She's much more than that. She's the queen in terms of this, and she knows how to execute power. She understands that. Lynn knows what's wrong. She knows more about what's going on in school than Ed Graff. I guarantee you, she knows more.
Well, Lynn, if you're there, we'd love to have you on the program, Lynn. If you can put a note in the chat, or we can send you a link. Actually, AZ put the link on the screen here. And Lynn, if you see this, just grab it and jump in the program. It'll have your voice here. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm ready to hand it back to Rashad. I just wanted to just say my passion is because I understand the system is broken in Minnesota. It's been broken for a long time, and the system is working in other places. It is not working against black kids in Denver. Okay? It's not working against black kids in Charlotte. Okay, why is it not working for black kids here, but it can't work here? I saw a woman with a PhD come into Minneapolis Harrison School and couldn't get a job here. She had to leave here because they tried to run her out of it because she saw all of the flaws in special ed. And the woman who fired her is a woman who still has a high position in the district. And both Lynn and I know that she is a barrier to kids getting a decent education at Harrison right now. So I'm finished with this.
Lynn is here. Lynn, how you doing, my friend? Good to see you. Thank you for joining the program. Can you hear me, Lynn? Unmute your microphone and join the conversation. Yeah, so what's on your mind? What are you've been listening to us talk for the past 40 minutes or so. Thank you for being a listener, but thank you more for being an active player in the lives of families and institutions in our community. What's on your mind right now, Lynn Crockett?
The fact that the MFT somehow managed to organize students at North to come up to the district office and do a sit-in today. Principal don't know about it. PTA don't know about it. Alumni Association don't know about it. Nobody knows who did it, but the MFT did it. And I got a text now that they're up at the Davis Center doing the cha-cha. So using our kids like that, for entertainment, but also our kids don't understand. Like Rashad said, they like their favorite teacher, but they are not aware of the other teachers. And the way this contract is going, the way they're operating, clearly there is no intent to protect black teachers. There is no intent to sign a memorandum of agreement, which I understand is being rewritten because for some reason you can't use the terms BIPOC or people of color in it, which is kind of a problem for me because a memorandum of agreement is supposed to support and help recruit and retain teachers of color. And yet we don't want to call it teachers of color. So now who exactly are we supporting or trying to retain? And I don't think the kids understand that if the teachers get everything they want, we're going to lose schools on the north side. It's going to have a big impact on us because the district does not have the money to pay them what they want. So our smaller schools, I've heard 3 or 4 or 5 names, makes me sick to my stomach. You just moved all our families because of the comprehensive design disaster, which I call it, and you put them in schools they don't want to be in. And now if this wins and they close more schools, you're going to move families again? Not going to happen. They're going to leave. They're going to leave. So it doesn't seem like anybody is really concerned about us. It seems like they're more concerned about protecting the people who are already part of the problem.
Rashad, go ahead.
Hey, Miss Crockett just said it all. You know what I mean? It's like we are, and this is for our people, right? For Black people in Minneapolis, in the Twin Cities, in this state, I'm not going to say, hey, it's over after this, or we ain't got a chance after this. We can't just throw our hands up because, again, our children don't get a K-12 do-over. So we got to figure this thing out. But I think it's one of those times where it's like, if we don't step up as Black people, I mean, I look at the three of y'all, right? Y'all been fighting this fight for our people for decades now. And unfortunately, we might have things around the edges that we can point to, but it's like we haven't made much progress over the years, right? And it's just like, it pisses me off to know that these teachers unions are doing what they're doing. And
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Let me interject. Sorry to interrupt, Rashad.
Good.
But you know how I get when my passion gets there. And at 87, I want to say them before I forget them. Excuse me. Okay, but let me just say this. Okay, but let me just say this. Lynn Crockett got an education from North High School. She can read at boarding grade level. I don't know whether she went to college or not. She sounds like she got a PhD in education to me. That's what she sounds like. So whether that's formal or not, I know she knows what's going on in schools, and she knows what should go in school, and look at her own kids. And that's a classic example of kids who become outstanding people. So if we could do it for Lynn, we could do it for many other Black people who grew up in North Minneapolis. We could do it for Prince out south, or do it for Gary Hines out south, for Emerson Carr out south, for Harry Davis Jr. out south. Come on, y'all. What are you, Joyce Hughes, a Fulbright scholar, a member of the Helsinki Commission, the first woman ever nominated for a federal judgeship, came out of Minneapolis Central High School. So if you could educate them then what got in the way? White teachers and the union that decided that protecting the teachers at all costs was their job, and that's why they ran Richard out here. Come on, y'all. So don't get me started, because right now I'm angry that they're using our kids. Don't ever do that again. You don't use our kids without their parents being advised. And North's got a strong alumni association, and everybody knows it. You let them know that you're going to do that and get their permission. Okay, but that's the union at play. So I've got nothing but condemnation. The hell with them all. And what did the pastor that used to preach for Obama out of that big church in Chicago? Mm-hmm. Whatever he said, God damn, okay, God damn MFT. Because they're not treating our kids right. And everybody knows it. So we got a legislation, we got everything. Go ahead, Lynn, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Lynn, on the ground, what are parents that you talk to saying, Lynn?
Doing better.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Say that again, Ms. Crockett. We can hear you now.
The teachers want more money. They want raises. But in the last 6 or 7 years, 8, 9, 10 years, our kids have been at the bottom every single time. So why are we giving you a raise? We're giving you a raise for not teaching them. I mean, you get them. And way back, probably 10 years ago, when they stopped doing average yearly progress, which they rated schools by, and Minneapolis wasn't making it 3 years in a row, and the district and the state decided to come in and take us over unless we did a turnaround. I just see that the same thing happening here. We did a turnaround and nothing changed because they didn't even honor the agreement or the things that went with the turnaround. They were never delivered. So for us to be at the same place now, and Wisconsin's assembly just decided to close Milwaukee public schools, that scares the hell out of me, because we're too close to them and we're not delivering on the promise. And I don't know how. I've never had a job I could keep that I didn't do. So if your kid leaves third grade, at the first grade level, no penalty. I don't get that. And I don't know why parents aren't mad, because they're not getting bang for their buck, because they're taxpayers and they're paying these salaries. So how come we're not pushing back? And they're not telling the kids that what we're doing will hurt you and other Black people. They're just saying, you don't want to lose your teacher. The message to our kids is wrong. The message to our parents is wrong.
And Ms. Crockett,
so
it makes me wonder.
And clear it up as best I can.
Oh, yeah. And we appreciate you too, Ms. Crockett. It makes me wonder, right? I mean, this teachers union strike, it was supposed to be about teachers of color, protecting teachers of color. And what we've seen is that evolved from them stating it as a priority to all of a sudden it being performative, to all of a sudden now our children being dragged into this where we can see it as manipulative, right? The one thing I
It's a
want
bait
folks
and
to
switch.
know, it's a bait and switch, right? And then we hear these different talking points and messaging from the teachers union, and it's just like, it's ridiculous. They talk about more money. Well, I'm here to let folks know that in Mississippi, and for me as a 37-year-old man, I can't think of any more racist place than Mississippi based on everything I was told growing up, right? So in Mississippi, Black children are being educated. They're learning how to read. They can do math at much higher rates than here in Minnesota, here in Minneapolis. Here's the kicker. It's also with way less money.
Yep.
I think they spend $10,000 to $12,000 less per pupil. They don't have $600 million that comes in from the state every year to close the gap, right? So it's like, Ms. Crockett's right. I mean, you're asking for a raise for this type of performance. It's mind-blowing. And we talked about at the beginning, you know, the differences in St. Paul Federation of Educators and MFT, right? Here are some more interesting facts that, you know, aren't widely known, right? Greta Callahan, who's the MFT president, has applied for a leadership role with Education Minnesota. The white boy, Sean, I forget his last name. He's the president of the ESPs. He's applied for a leadership role with Education Minnesota. So they are putting on the greatest performance of their lives in hopes that they can go and take on those leadership roles at Education Minnesota, right? Something that's more.
Tell people who that is.
So Education Minnesota, they are the grand wizards of all grand wizards when it comes to killing our children's hopes and dreams. They are the state teachers union. They control the little, you know, front groups in the different cities, but they're the heads, right? And a big part of their messaging, as you'll see, reminder, we are in an election season, is to try to suck up that 9.6 billion, right? Is to try to say, we need more money, right? We need more mental health supports. We can't teach these Black and brown kids until we fix them. That's what I hear when I hear them talking about mental health supports. One of you mentioned Harrison School earlier, right? If you go talk to the teachers at Harrison, there's not a mental health support that's a part of MFT's call that would impact Harrison. And if you know Harrison, well, it could be easy to believe that you might need some mental health supports there, but none of these supports would go to helping those students at Harrison. The other thing I'll point out, and this data isn't, you know, easily accessible, but if you look at the number of child protection cases that come from these white women who are the mental health supports in the schools, it's ridiculous. Our families in every school are having child protection. CPS called on them for things that, if this was a person who was familiar with our people, who believed in our children, believed in our parents, they would not be destructing our Black families, our brown families, right? So that's what I hear when I hear those teachers talking about mental health. When I hear more money, we just need more money, I think about Mississippi. I think about Texas. I think about these states that they're spending way less money on our babies, but more of our babies can read, right? To Ms. Crockett's point on, you know, parents pushing back, I would say that we've seen more and more parents starting to push back, right? Starting to speak up and at least ask questions, but we're not at that point yet, right? We're not at that point of a groundswell where parents are saying, hey, you're going to do right by us, or you're not going to make any money off of our children, right?
You're right.
Like, we're getting close.
So does this mean that the Minnesota Parent Union supports the district in this labor strike?
We hold them all accountable. right?
Okay.
The district, the teachers unions, they're all getting an F, right? You'll see some billboards soon where we're going to tell you how we feel about the district, about the teachers union, as well as the school board, right? We have school board directors like Director Elamine, Director Cirillo, who have been pushed out of these spaces, right? They've been pushed out because they're pushing back and speaking up for our children. They are unapologetically for our children, and they're being pushed out to space. They're being ignored. Same thing with Nafisa Muhammad, the ESPs, Alexis Mann. They're letting us know that they don't feel like they're the priority of the union. Who's listening though? Right? Are our legislators and elected officials listening? Are our district leaders listening? Are the union leaders listening?
Listen, we're about out of time, but I want to have two things. One is, Lynn, final advice you might give to parents and community people that are standing on the sidelines. How do they bring their voice to this situation? And then, Rashad, I want to close with you giving contact information, because I'm sure you're trying to recruit more parents to be part of the parent union. So, Lynn, first to you, what should sisters and brothers in the community feel about how they can step up and be involved and support Black children? And I think Lynn's frozen here on the video, so go ahead.
She's mute.
Okay, we cannot hear you. We're tight on time. Rashad, go ahead. What are your thoughts? Got about 2 minutes left here.
I was just popping some stuff into the chat, so I'll finish popping that in there. But I think it's about this, right? Black parents, brown parents, indigenous parents, our children are at the bottom. This isn't nothing new. The thing that's new is us rising up as parents, getting that information, pushing back on the status quo. I'll tell you right now, I feel much better hearing Ms. Crockett say the things that she said. Right? Because I'll tell you, I was getting calls last week and people were talking about, oh, they're swarming us. They're attacking you online. They're doing this. They're doing that. Right? That's the tactics of white supremacy. Right? We have to come together as Black people, indigenous people, brown people, and figure out what do our tactics need to be to push back on these powerful machines. Right? They spend about, the teachers unions, they spend millions of dollars on elections. Right? They spend millions of dollars to manipulate our children and not educate them. Right? At Minnesota Parent Union, we don't have millions of dollars, but I grew up with not much money. We grew up with not much money, so we know how to utilize it to get the best return on investment. And I'll tell you, at Minnesota Parent Union, the best return on our investment is parents speaking up and demanding that quality education.
We got 30 seconds, Rashad. How can people reach out to you or connect with you and the Minnesota Parent Union?
You can email us at levelup@mnparentunion.org. You can become a member that way. You can also get involved. We've got chapters in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We've got 15 chapters around the state now. And this is over 2 years during COVID. I remember when I first met Ms. Crockett, she said, well, what you gonna do? I said, we're going to fight hard. She said, we'll see. Well, Ms. Crockett, you see we still in it. Would love to have you on our board of directors if you got time, or in our leadership circle. We got to do this, y'all. If Black lives truly matter, this is the time for us to step up as a community and make sure that's the case.
Rashad, keep up the good work. I'm Al McFarlane. Thanks to Rashad Turner. Thanks to Lynn Crockett. Thanks to Bill English. Join me again this time next week. Conversations with Al McFarlane. We'll see you.